everyone from Kate and myself, just having our normal conversation around culture. So, I started a series of culture conversations with some of my wonderful connections on LinkedIn. I wanted to talk to particular individuals because they seem to have a really interesting perspective around culture. And I think that Kate and I have known each other for a number of months now. And, by via connecting through LinkedIn, we've just become really good friends. And I just posted something yesterday, and Kate said it really resonated. So today, without much planning, we have come live to share our conversation. Please feel free to join us, comment, but we're just going to go into this conversation around food and culture. So, hello, Kate. Introduce
Yeah,
yourself.
hello, Monwara. Thank you so much for inviting me to this conversation about culture. Yeah, really in my space of passion. So, yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
Fantastic. So, a short intro about myself. I am passionate about leadership, especially in women, and I do a bit of consultancy, coaching, and mentoring around women and leadership. And I do run a course which I developed last year, a program for CEOs, directors, and anybody in the senior role. I've a particular passion around charities because I've worked with charities for 30 years plus. And I'm a creative. I am also a CEO of a small charity in East London, as well as a number of other things. But I think what many of you, Kate, you've definitely seen me on LinkedIn is sharing some of the food and things I love cooking and baking. So tell us about you.
Yeah, thank you, Monwara. So, I'm Kate Isichei. I'm a global internal communications consultant. Internal comms is my area of expertise. I also host Engagement Express podcast. But on the side, I'm also an aromatherapist, a trained aromatherapist, and I have a program called Aroma SOS, which is my own signature program on introducing aromatherapy to a wide range of people. If you're interested in bringing calm, peace, tranquility, and relaxation into your life, more of it anyway, then that program is for you. And I'm really happy to be here with Monwara. As she said, I've been in touch with her for the last few months, and she's become a really good friend to me. Real support mechanism to get me through some tough times, and I'm very happy to have a conversation with her today about culture, food, and all things, yeah, all things related to love and joy.
Fantastic. And so tell me, like I think we have that food is that one thing that connects both of us, perhaps. So we talk about cultural identity and what role does food play in this?
Yeah, exactly. Well, in my life, food plays a massive part of my upbringing. So my background is Nigerian, and Nigerian people love to cook. They love food, and they use it as a way to communicate their affection, and their love for their family members. So in my family, we were never talking about love. I love you. I miss you. We didn't do all that. We just say, "You hungry?" And then you get a plate of wonderful food in front of you, home cooked, homemade. Everything done by hand from scratch. So the love and the effort was put into that food, and given to you as a joyful way to express your feelings without having to say it. So yeah, food means a lot to me.
That's so lovely because we don't actually think of it that way. Seriously, I feel like just listening to you is probably exactly the same in my culture. In the Bangladeshi culture, our table will always be full of variety,
Mm,
and I think it just like personally on a personal level, it's always given me joy to feed
yes.
someone.
Right, exactly. That's what my parents were like. So in our culture, you do not come to a house, a Nigerian household, and refuse food, because that's considered to be not necessarily just rude, but also a rejection of affection. a rejection of emotion, a rejection of love. Someone's offered you their heart on a plate, so to speak, and you've said no. So, we always had this mindfulness around when we were growing up, going to aunties and uncles' houses and then bringing out big plates of food, chicken and rice and brown rice and, all sorts of things, black eyed beans. Even if you weren't hungry, you would eat them just to show your appreciation for the affection shown to you. So, yeah, that's exactly how it was for us too. When we were growing up, food meant much more. And it's really important to people as well to give that food. It's something that makes them happy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, have you found like in work environments that you've been in where food has helped? Like I know like when we have community events in the charity sector, or even when I worked for the council in Camden, we used to like lunchtime was a big deal. We would go out for a meal together, and like being a Muslim woman, like I don't really fancy going to the pub, but there was this place local to where I worked, and everybody went there at lunchtime, and and I knew like I would have a vegetarian option, and I
Mm.
loved going. It was like something we did once a week, and it was fun.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, food really does play that binding role, doesn't it? That networking role, that opportunity to meet new people, to make friends, to make connections. Food can play that pivotal role. So, I've always been brought up to share food and to give food as a way to, build connections, offer people. And actually, I worked for an organization once where the vast majority of people were Asian, and they
Mm.
would bring in big bowls, big Tupperware of food, curries and rices and, different things, chapatis and, samosas. And they would just sit and eat, from the same tub. Everyone would dig in, and it was such a nice way to share, an experience, and it really brought you together. So when you did that, it was very uncomfortable, I have to say, for us people brought up in the UK, especially, in England. We're very reserved. We have our individual plates and our knife and our fork, and we sit there and we eat, or we have our sandwiches from our own plate. But this thing was very different. So everyone would just muck in, it'd be hands in together pre-COVID, obviously. But then after a while, you started to see people doing, getting involved, and I certainly did as well. And then we'd go back to our desks, and it was no problem to have, a challenging conversation, or, a bit of a disagreement, because you'd just been tucking into the same meal together in the same Tupperware. So it
Mm.
made our lives easier in a lot of ways, because we built these really strong connections through food, through sharing food, through eating the same food, and through having that experience of consuming. I think the thing about food is that it's quite an intimate thing, don't you think? There's intimacy there.
Absolutely, and it's almost like you know there are lots of dishes from your community, my community, somebody else's community that will have similarities. It opens up conversation, it gets people talking, and then we realize actually we have so much more in common than we think.
Exactly, exactly. And this is the thing, it opens up those doors for conversation. Whereas, if you're going around tight-lipped and reserved and, acting in this very individual way, then you just don't get that opportunity to understand what other people are about, where they come from. And like you say, there is so much more that's similar, between us than what's different. But people don't realize that, because they have lots of um, should we say, assumptions about people, certain ways that they think we're going to behave, or we're going to speak, or we're going to do. They think our values are strange or at odds with theirs.
Mm.
But I was talking to another contact on another network member on LinkedIn. I think it was last week, as I posted something. It was Friday on Lent. I don't know if you saw that post, and it was about
I
giving up
did.
something. Yeah, and someone said there was lots of similarities, between the Muslim faith and
Yes.
and Christianity.
Mm.
And yeah, people just don't sit there and think of that. They think, oh yeah, it's Lent, and oh no, 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 they do Ramadan, they do Eid, but no one actually. When you start to read about it, you start to look into it, you start to talk to people about their experience. What do they do in their homes? At this time, talk to people. That's what I do, and I find out, oh yeah, we do that too. We don't call it the same thing. It's not
Mm.
the same name for sure, but
Mm.
it's a similar philosophy in that
That's
we
right.
will, yes, and that's what's important, the philosophy. What it's called is really not that important. It's more about the feeling behind it, the meaning behind it, and how you bring that into your life, and give back to others, which is what Lent and what Ramadan is all about. It's about sacrifice for sure, but it's also about giving to others in a meaningful way.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. Like, I've always worked with people from diverse backgrounds, and I've always seen the similarities. And what's interesting is, over the years, when I've worked with particular people, maybe from my own similar background, and often it's not about your cultural identity, more about your knowledge and cultural competence. So,
Exactly.
people I've worked with from my own community knew very little about another community. I would sometimes say, oh yeah, I worked with I had two friends when I worked in XYZ organization, and they were Nigerian.
Yeah,
Listen, they love okra like we do, and they eat
yeah,
the
love
peppers.
okra.
And don't just think it's the Bengalis that can take
No.
heat, because they can
Yeah,
take it.
they can. Yeah, we can. We do love okra. Yeah, you're right. And I mean, I'm an international player. I always call myself, and a lot of people who know me really well, they call me an international player because I'm so used to being around people from different cultures, different backgrounds, different languages. um I'm just so used to it, and it just doesn't, I thrive on it. It makes me feel very at ease when I'm around difference. I don't necessarily need to be around people who talk like me, or look like me, or walk like me, or think like me, or have been educated like me.
Mm.
I want to learn from others who have had different experiences. And this is why I do a lot of work in the community, and I don't get the chance to do it as much as I would like. But when I wasn't working, I've always done charity work, and I've worked at homeless soup runs for the church, my church that I attend every Sunday. And it's absolutely fascinating the kind of people you will meet, the backgrounds they have, the experiences they've had, the lives they've led. You just wouldn't believe it.
Mhm.
You see these people and you think, oh my gosh, he's, sorry to say it, but I see a lot of people who've soiled themselves, who haven't washed in a long time, who haven't, their teeth are all rotted because they haven't been to the dentist for, they've got no soap to wash, nowhere to clean themselves. But when you sit down and you talk to them as a human being, one to one, you realize that there's not very much different between you. You've got luck on your side. You've had a, perhaps, turned a different road. You may have ended up the same way. I'm
Mhm.
always so grateful and thankful when I leave those sessions, because I think to myself, there, but for the grace of God, I go. It's astonishing. People with master's degrees, just one thing after another, a series of unfortunate events is what you might describe it as. Divorce, a death in the family, drugs, alcohol abuse, down, 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 like a spiral, and not being able to pick themselves up again.
And that's what I find really, I think for me, it's really touching quite deeply in understanding that there's so much to a person. We know very, very little. And
Yeah,
nobody, and I had this conversation the other day with somebody that, somebody who doesn't really have much empathy, because they believe that people end up in certain situations because of their own choices or whatever decisions they made in life. And, I just felt like sometimes you can't change people's perspective.
Mm.
like, and sometimes it's best not to even,
Yeah.
but like so much goes wrong in a person's life before they
Mm.
get to that point. And
Exactly.
and often it's not within a person's control, because if it was within their control, they would have been able to do something about it.
Exactly.
And this is the problem, because I find that sometimes even in the coaching world, if I have to someone comes to me and I need to mentor them, and I see that there is a lot of unresolved trauma that requires a lot more support, I wouldn't be doing them justice. I wouldn't even be able to help them, because they really need to get some sort of additional support before they could even be ready for, what I have to offer or to help them with.
Right.
And that could be quite, and mental health is such a big thing. But I'm going to go back to food for a minute, because I was just thinking about the pandemic and, the current situation with food crisis and everything.
Mm.
And I remember during the pandemic, the places that served the community, the
Yeah.
places that really helped, goes back to our values. Were the churches and the mosques that were the first to sort of pivot
Yeah,
and
they
say,
were.
we're going to open our doors. Because
Mm.
I remember like local community activists, and I was part of these groups, and you had these people that were from the mosques, and they were like, oh yeah, but if we go and we try and make this suggestion, we won't be welcome because we're a mosque. And it felt like the feelings were the same for the churches. But what's interesting is we all want to do the same thing. We all want to help the most needy and the most vulnerable,
Exactly.
but we're not joining hands because of our differences.
Right, totally agree. I remember during the pandemic, the first group, I think, to come out and start serving the nurses and the doctors were from a mosque, and everyone was really surprised in the news, reporting on it. And I thought to myself, well, that says a lot, doesn't it? That there's an
Mhm.
expectation about who's willing to offer charity and who isn't. But you're right that, food is a way to demonstrate love and care for others who are less fortunate. It's the best way, really.
It
Uh,
is, because nobody wants to see anybody without food. And
no.
I don't think, and especially like people of faith. But that comparison you made with Lent and Ramadan. Ramadan's actually going to be on the 23rd of March.
Okay.
So it's a month from 23rd of March, and then we celebrate after 30 days. But the whole idea is that, that you put yourself in a position where you
Mm,
feel what it's like not to have
exactly.
food and
Right.
water. So we can't have food or water, no fluid. And it's hard for the first 2 3 days, but then your body gets used to it. But it's also really good for your body, because you go through like what's the word I'm looking for?
A fast or
The fast itself
mm,
is a good way of, oh, my mind's gone blank now, but
I do know what you
getting
mean.
the
It is,
toxins.
yes, it is actually beneficial for the body. It's been proven scientifically that
Mm,
fasting is good for the body. Yeah. Intermittent fasting.
yeah. So I feel that there's so much. So during the pandemic, we did this activity, my like colleagues and I did this activity where, and I think these kind of things are really fun within the workplace, and they open up, break down barriers. So we did this activity where I said to everybody, and it was all done online, and I said, we're going to, all you're going to need is plain flour, oil, and a pinch of salt and some water. You're going to need your cooker with like a pan on it. And I said to everybody, we're going to make a roti, right? Chapati, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And I sort of guided them how to do the dough and to make, but because it would have been easy, so the challenge was whoever makes the most roundest one, right, will win.
Yeah.
And so we, like, everybody was making it, and we're just trying to see whose is the most round. And somebody who'd never ever made one before, was hers was immaculate. And the
Amazing.
second the second part of the challenge was, the second one has to look like a map of a country.
Yeah.
And that then opened up conversation about the country, the
Yeah.
map that you just made. So it was really, really interesting. So have like what kind of situations have you been in, like in terms of work, where you feel like, okay, the communication, like food, really opened doors or broke down barriers?
Yeah, so food is always my entry point into, making deeper relationships or, forging new ones. I've worked all over the place, and I've had sort of global roles, but mainly European and EMEA roles. So Europe, Middle East and Africa, and I've worked with people who have come from all of those, different parts of the world. And it's fascinating because everyone has their own dishes, their own likes, their own tastes for food based on what they've been brought up on. So we'd always have conversations, myself and Swiss people, German, French. There was a lady who was based in Dubai. We'd have lunch together and we'd talk about, Russian food and, food from Poland and Hungary and, different dishes. That's why I'm so fascinated with people like, yourself and Catherine Reed, based in Austria, and Stella in Germany, because those are my spaces that I'm so used to, sharing stories, food stories. There's Tesco do a campaign, don't they? Their whole advertising campaign is called Food Love Stories. And that's
Mm,
so apt because food is all about love.
yeah.
And so we, talk about, we may not have a comfortable initial interaction because there's all sorts of prejudices and stereotypes that people carry around in their heads.
Mm,
When I first started to work in Switzerland back in 2008, there was, I was welcomed for sure, but people, were sort of a bit skeptical perhaps about who I was and, perhaps, the way I would behave and interact with people. But you overcome those challenges through conversations sometimes about food. So I talk about my national dishes that my mom and dad used to make, the ground rice and the dishes we'd make on specific occasions like Christmas, which is a kind of a delicacy called peanut meat, which is a meat that's dipped in a peanut, kind of a satay you might call it.
mm,
Very hot, very
mm.
spicy, and goes really well with beer. Yeah, and it's considered to be a kind of a snack you might have with, wine, or as I said, as and a beer. And I remember telling this Swiss people about it, and they were like, "Oh God, that sounds amazing! We love peanut. We love. Could you bring us some in? And I don't think I ever did, but they were fascinated by this meat that had been roasted in a satay, a kind of a hot, spicy satay, and I'm sure it would have blown their heads off if they tried it, but it was a really, it was a really nice conversation. And I still remember it. It was over 10 years ago, but I still remember.
Mm. Well, you spared them then. You didn't want to blow their
I
heads.
spared them. I would have made it mild for them because my mum didn't like it hot either. She wasn't keen on the spice. But we would ask her to make it very hot for us. And the traditional flavor is very, very hot and spicy. Yeah.
Do you sometimes find like, home cooked food is very different to what you get in the restaurants? Because I've I've met people that say, "Oh no, no, I don't like Indian food. I don't like
Mm.
that kind of food." And
Yeah.
then I bring it in and they're like, "This tastes different
This is
though."
nothing like, yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, you and me are bakers.
Yeah.
We love to bake, and I'm a bit of a snob when it when it comes to baking. I love my ingredients, so they need to be good in quality ingredients, good quality butter, good quality cocoa. It makes a difference, trust me. When you're
Mhm.
baking. And so I've been to restaurants where I've been served chocolate cake, and it doesn't it's nowhere near as good as mine, and that sounds very, I don't know, it sounds
Snobby.
very, yeah, a little bit snooty and a bit proud, but honestly they were nothing. And the guests who were with me, they all loved, they were eating and eating, and I said, how can you eat that? And it doesn't taste, you can tell it's artificial. And they were, oh, it's delicious. They said, "Oh, well, you're a baker, aren't you?" And and that actually annoys me a bit because now I can't go to a restaurant.
That makes us both snobs.
Yeah, I can't stop picking at things because I bake a lot. I make not just cake, I cook a lot as well. And ingredients are really important to me.
Yeah, same here. And I can just look at a dish and I can tell a lot.
Yeah.
If you've been doing something for a long time and if
Yeah.
you're passionate about it, the thing is, I can say, like at work, I would say, if they bought takeaway, I could tell what the sauce has been made with and
Yeah.
how long
Yeah.
it's been cooked, how long ago
Exactly.
it was cooked. It's not fresh. I can tell, and that does annoy people because then they think, okay, she's got such a high standard.
No, but that's what happens when you practice so much and you cook a lot. I mean, I cook everything from scratch, more or
Mm.
less. And I don't like buying food now because I know what good food tastes like. So, even if I make a spaghetti bolognese, for example, I have to use celery and carrots and onion. I have to use a bay leaf from my garden. I've got a massive bay tree in my garden.
Oh, lovely.
I use fresh, herbs, oregano and thyme, and I have to if I make for example, a roux, like is it a roux? Is that the right word? A white
Rude.
sauce.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to boil the milk first with onion and some cloves, and I do all this from scratch. And the children just eat the macaroni cheese when it's finished, and I just look at them and think, you have no idea what love and passion went into that. I didn't just pop to Sainsbury's.
Are we still going to do that though in our 60s? Are we going to slow down?
Oh, I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know as well because, like, I do like my cooking and I
Oh,
enjoy it, but I have to say I don't cook as much as I used to. But
mm,
the more I give up on things like that, because cooking from scratch takes time,
it does.
I find that it frees me up to do other things. And
Very
that's
true.
probably why you see me doing so much more because my children have flown the nest. Well,
Yeah.
they're both like, much older, one's at uni and the other one's older. And I think, for a long time I was going in and cooking for the pensioners, 40, 50 people. And I love doing it. And because I did it, the seniors appreciate it so much. The day I go there, they can't help but tell me how much they miss me
Oh,
because it's that thing about, like people know when you feed them that you genuinely care.
yeah, it's true. Very, very true. Really true. And it's funny what you say actually about this idea of being freed up to do other things because I think I actually enjoy being busy in that respect because I'm giving love through my cooking. So I will often go above and beyond what you might consider to be normal in
Yeah.
order to do things. So my son, he's got autism
Mm,
and ADHD, and as a result of that, he's got sensory
mm,
requirements. There's certain tastes and textures he doesn't like,
mm,
and he doesn't get much fruits and veg in his diet. So the one thing he does love is crumble. Uh,
mm,
and so I'll make a sort of quite a fairly big apple crumble from scratch with Granny Smith apples, and I use porridge oats on for the crumble as well as flour to make it a bit healthier. And he'll finish it all, within a few days it will be gone. And I won't. No one else will eat it. It's only him. And then, like often, I'll forget that it's finished, and then I'll start baking at I don't know, 9, I baked at 9, 10 o'clock at night, just so he's got crumble the next day.
yeah.
And that's a duty, for me. Like, I don't know how I'd feel about not being needed anymore.
Mm, mm.
I
We
think
do
that makes me feel
things.
a bit sad.
Yeah, same here. I've always felt as a working mother that my children should have everything that they would have had I not worked. But
Mm,
mind you, like I've met lots of mothers that don't work, but they doesn't necessarily mean that they cook for their children. My kids love my cooking. They appreciate and not only the kids, over the years, being a daughter-in-law in a huge extended family. So my husband, like has a huge family, and my in-laws will tell you over the years that I've always, like done my bit. That I feel like I should be doing. And I put that pressure on myself, but I
Yeah, me
actually
too.
really enjoyed it. But now, these days, when I've got a meeting to go to or I've got something else, so long as it's not my children, I can cut corners. And even though I felt guilty with my husband, he would say, why? Give yourself a rest. If your hands are aching, just give it a rest. You've been on the
Yeah.
laptop all day, you know?
Exactly. I think we do. We are our own worst enemy, aren't we? We make a lash for our own backs.
Exactly.
And yeah, it's not as if we have to do it, but we just feel obliged to do it. And it may be something about the way we've been brought up. And my mum was the same. She would always cook for us from scratch. And I'd come home from university. I'll tell you a story. When I was at uni, I lost loads of weight. I'm slim anyway, as you know.
Mm,
I was very thin at uni, and it was natural. My mum was the same. And I was eating, but I probably wasn't eating as much as I did at home. So my dad came to pick me up after year one, my first year at uni. And he was completely mortified because I'd lost, quite a lot of weight, and he couldn't cope with it. Nigerians, it's like you're as far as they're concerned, that's the worst thing you could do, is like lose weight and not eat. Um,
mm,
and he was so shocked. So, he was saying to me, "What has happened? Aren't you eating?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm eating. It's just, it's just the way I am." So he went next door. Little did I know that he went next door to this couple. There's a man and his wife and their sister. One of the I think it was the wife's sister. They all lived together. They were in their 70s at the time. Really lovely family. And he went to ask them about my eating habits. And he was
oh,
questioning them like a police officer about when I ate and where I ate, and they didn't know, because obviously, they didn't know what I eat. They were like, so on the drive home, because it was a Staffordshire, Stoke-on-Trent, that's where I went to uni. My dad drove me back home to London. It was a good 3.5 hour journey, and after about an hour of sitting there in silence, he said, "Oh, I spoke to your neighbours, and they said that they are also worried that you were thin." And it was so interesting, because there was this whole, massive hoo-ha. And then the minute I got home, the first thing he said to my mum was, "Quick, Joe, get her something to eat. She's wasting away." It was just, for me, it was so hilarious. But to them, it was their little child who was not eating properly. They need to show me, they didn't say, "Oh, we miss you, we love you." That was the way they showed they miss me and they love me.
yeah, no, it's wonderful, these stories that when we reflect back. And then I went to see my daughter on Sunday and I did exactly the same thing. I said to my
Did you?
daughter, you lost weight.
Oh, that's so sweet. That's
And
lovely.
she said, I haven't. I said,
No.
I hugged her and I said, you feel like you've lost weight.
Yeah, oh, bless. That's so sweet. That's
Yeah,
so
I
sweet.
took her so much food. I just like,
Oh,
cooked in containers, everything home cooked,
oh,
all the things she liked.
lovely.
But it's when I was in Bangladesh. So this is the thing I was saying, like it's such a fantastic way of building relationships with people. It connects people. When I was in Bangladesh, I cooked for 50 people, like outside in the ground. We just
Yeah.
made a hole in the ground, 3 bricks, and I cooked like rice and chicken for everybody. And
Wow.
it was so nice. And you know what the nieces said to me? I had invited them. They're all married, like I met them when they were little, and they're all married, have kids of their own. So I invited them all over, and we had like, about 40 something family members. And I was there on my own, not with the husband or the kids. And I overheard them saying that it's the first time we feel like we're being taken care of, because
No.
often we come and we have to fend for ourselves. And she's
Yeah.
come from abroad and she's taking care of us. I love that idea of taking care, because I feel like I can, because like you said, the more you do, the more you're able to do, isn't it?
Exactly. And that showing that love and that care and that attention is so important to people, much more important than we probably realize. And one of the reasons why my dad was so adamant about feeding, and he was very distraught, actually. I probably underestimated. I'm laughing now, but that
Mm,
probably does him a disservice, because I think he was quite upset that day. When
mm,
he was be growing up in Nigeria. His mum and dad passed away when he was very young, so he was still a child when they went, and so he was passed to his a relative, and I think it was some distant relative, an aunt, and they had children already. But they asked, they said that he could come and stay with them, but she wouldn't feed him
Mm.
when he was growing up. They give dinner to the children and tell him he couldn't have any.
Mm.
So he would go out into the streets and pick mangoes and pawpaws uh,
Mm.
and eat them.
Mm.
So he was really thin when he was young, and so he's experienced, because the first thing the priest said when we went to see the priest about my dad's funeral was that, what kind of things did he used to like, what was his mannerisms. The first thing he'd say to you when he saw, even up until, as grown up as I am, I remember a couple of years ago when he was still here, the first thing he'd say to me was, have you eaten?
Mm.
Have you eaten? Have you had
Mm.
something to eat? And he would go, and I'd say, yeah, of course, I've eaten. But that was just because he'd experienced hunger as a child.
Mm.
And that
It's
always really upsets me.
it's so interesting, isn't it? When we dig deep, it's really interesting. But and somebody else said something similar to me about I had all these different leaders together in a group in a room, and I did this part of my leadership training. I did an exercise where I asked them to share one person that they look up to, a role model. And the second thing, what are the reasons why they do charity work? And there was a lady there that said that her parents, she always saw them growing up, no matter what little they had, every Sunday after church, whoever would come at their door, they would never let them go without feeding them.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
she said, whether it was one chicken or just the bones, my mom always knew what to do with very little. And she said, my mom would always, even if she has to, use the bones and make soup out of it.
Yeah,
And people from the church, the needy people, not the people who don't, but the needy people. So no
yeah,
one ever went hungry when they came on our doorstep. So that's
no,
like really, really interesting how like, and that to me is like values, whether it's a Christian or a Muslim. I spoke to a very close friend of mine who is works in a church, and she's a very, very strict Christian. And she said to me, and I said to her, all of this stuff you're doing with food bank and giving, helping the poor and all that during the pandemic, I said, what happens after the pandemic and you run out of money? You've got to think about sustainability. Do you know what she said to me? She said, I'm a Christian, Manwara. If I have nothing, I will go inside my own house and take out whatever I need to from the fridge.
exactly. That's what you do. That is what
Yeah.
you do.
And that I thought to myself, it's so much about values.
It is. It's about values and the upbringing that you've had, which feeds into those values. My mom was always giving people food, always. Even if it meant she wouldn't have any food, didn't matter.
Mm.
She'd wrap up whatever she had, pasta, some sauce she'd made. Here, so you've got something to eat. Always putting food. Take, and but you haven't got anything. Oh, don't worry. Just take.
Mm.
It really makes me feel happy that I've been taught how to behave in that way, because
Mm.
yeah, for me, whenever I have friends, right, English friends in particular, they always laugh at me because them and their children, they go home, their
Mm.
stomachs, you know, busting.
Yeah, I
I'm
can
like,
almost imagine. Yeah, I
yeah,
can.
literally. Like
Yeah.
I've got a really good friend. She's got 4 children, and
Mm.
they came and I made this buffet style lunch, and I even made my own ice cream, lemon ice cream.
Oh,
And so,
nice.
yeah,
Sounds
it was
yum.
delicious, Monwara. If I see you one day, I'll make it for you in the summer. And
And I know you would as well.
I would, you know me. And yeah, and the son, the little one, he was only 3 at the time, said, "Can he have some more?" And I said, "Oh, ask your." And I was ready to dish it out, and I suddenly
Mm.
caught myself and thought, "Well, let me ask. Ask your mummy." And his mum said,
Yeah,
no,
it's
no, that's enough now. And I was really distraught, inside my heart. So I was like, oh
yeah, yeah. No, tell me what's your favorite Nigerian dish?
no. Ah, without a doubt, it's Accra. Well, actually, I have quite a few favorites, but
Okay,
yeah, Accra is my favorite. Accra is black eyed beans
okay.
that have been ground up with water, with onion, with shrimp, with
Hmm.
chilies, and some other spices, and then it goes into this soft kind of soft mix, like a sauce, a
Hmm.
thick sauce, and then it's very thick. So you put one lump into a frying pan, one by one, and you fry them into these circular patties.
Oh, really interesting. I don't
Delicious.
think, yeah, I don't think we have anything like that in my cultural. So that sounds different. And it
Ground
sounds
up.
like something I could eat because it's shrimps.
I think you would like it. Yeah, not too
Yeah.
much shrimp. The shrimp is just to flavor the black eyed beans, because the black eyed beans are quite bland, on themselves,
Um,
by themselves. Yeah, so you kind of flavor it up, and it's really nice with a cup of tea. Very nice for breakfast.
oh,
Very
wow.
nice as a snack, but really filling because it's fibers, pulses.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's my favorite. And you, what's your favorite?
What's my favorite? I don't know. I like lots of things. If I tell you the truth, you're going to tell me off. But cake is probably one of my favorites, but that's probably my downside as well. If I didn't have a sweet tooth, I'd be much more fitter. I have cut down, but like I like um, a nice rich carrot cake, like a
Ooh,
really really rich one, but like one that doesn't have too much raisins.
ooh,
Like I don't like too much raisins.
no.
I also like a walnut coffee cake.
Oh, I love walnut coffee.
Yeah.
I'll make you a walnut and coffee then. Next time.
Oops, I'm in danger now. And in
Yeah.
terms of Asian food, I do occasionally like to really burn my taste buds. So something with a lot of heat, the hot peppers. But occasionally, I consider myself really versatile. The more colorful my food is, the more I like it. There's something about the aesthetics of like visually
Mm,
seeing lots of color. So for me, a nice salad with lots of color, it doesn't have to have meat. It doesn't have to have fish in it.
true.
With lots of color, I love it. You know, the beetroots, the carrots, avocado. Nice if I could add some salmon or even like prawns, like
Oh, I
king
love that.
prawns. I love stuff like that, and I find like within our Asian culture, probably the thing that is similar maybe is biryani, maybe a
Oh,
little.
yes.
It all
I like
depends.
biryani. Yeah.
It's just the way I cook it. I like to
Yeah.
cook lots of things. Like most people will either cook chicken biryani, lamb biryani, or
Yeah.
vegetable biryani. I like to put vegetable in my chicken and lamb. And actually, at work, it's a
Mm.
bit famous. So
Ooh.
my colleagues will always choose. If we do like bring a dish in, and they love
Yeah.
doing that. We didn't do it for a long time, and a colleague said, oh, really missed that. Let's bring it in. So everyone brought a dish in, and I was like, I'll bring in whatever you want me to bring in. And they said, biryani, please.
Lovely.
Yeah,
Really nice. That
yeah,
sounds delicious.
yeah.
The-
One day soon, hopefully.
Yeah, we're gonna have a big feast one day soon. I know. I can feel it in my bones.
Definitely, definitely. We've been talking for ages, Kate. Is there anything like you want to share, like in terms of like maybe culture within the workplace and communication generally, like you want to add before we kind of finish up?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's all about, I don't like the word tolerance. I hate the word tolerance because that makes it feel like you're enduring something and that there's some
Mm,
pain involved in it. I feel like the idea of inclusivity is a great word. Equity is a great word. Diversity is a great word. It's all about making people feel welcome, not just making them feel welcome, because that's the danger, I think. where organizations say, we'll make you feel welcome. You're welcome here, but only if you present in a certain way, only if you dress in a certain way, only if you look a certain way. And Cherie Daniels, who's the HR, the very famous now HR consultant on LinkedIn, she did a video a couple of days ago about her hair being shaved. And she said one of the reasons why she left the corporate world was because of the need to conform. You know, you can't turn up with plaits, you can't turn up with twists, you can't turn up with locks. You know, I'm really mindful of when my hair is ethnically styled because you are worried about the perceptions. So if you're an organization that's truly inclusive, that's truly wanting to welcome people of all backgrounds and cultures, then you have to be more than tolerant. You can't just say we're tolerant here. You have to allow people to be who they want to be in the space that you've created. You can't create a one size fits all approach, because we're not one size fits all. We're all different. We all, you know, have different experiences, and you know, God didn't make us to be the same. So
And what happens if leadership don't get that?
well, leadership are the prime examples of problem, really, in the organizations that you see, where you see poor cultures. It's the leaders who are the primary reason for that. You know, they are the ambassadors for the organization. They are the forerunners. They're the ones who need to demonstrate the values, the culture, the behaviors in action every day. So if you have a leader who sits in his room, closes his door, her door, refuses to speak to employees, only favors certain employees, that's going to flow down the hierarchy. People are going to see that and think, okay, you know, he or she behaves in that way, therefore, you know, I can get away with it too. You know, you have to lead from the top. And I think as a leader, you've got a huge responsibility to role model certain behaviors. You can't say you want all you want all the power without any of the responsibility or accountability. I think being a leader you have to have certain traits. And if you don't have them, I don't think you have any business in being a leader. I call myself an empath. I am an empath. And I don't know if you know what an empath is, but it's someone who feels others' emotions very keenly. So I'm quite reserved because of that. So I know when people are upset intrinsically, you know, instinctively inside here, like I feel it. So I often try to be on my own because that helps me to recover. You know, if I sit next to someone on a bus, or I see someone in the street, or I pass someone, I don't even have to touch them, or you know, or have any physical contact. I can feel if they're in pain or they're unhappy. And that's really helped me a lot in my leadership roles, because I'm able to identify when there's a problem and do something about it. I have a lot of empathy, which sometimes gets me into trouble.
Yeah, I mean, it resonates because I am similar. I think with I don't know if you've heard, like, I find that whether you're extrovert or introvert, as empaths, also makes a difference. And I felt that the level of empathy, if it's a little bit over the top, and where we cannot control our own emotions, and we allow how we feel about someone else's feelings, it can completely weigh us down. And I think that's the point where the danger happens. So, like in a most recent situation, I was with somebody else who similar to you, similar to me, has very high levels of empathy. Yet I was seeing both sides, not just the person who was projecting their emotions. The other person was really just looking at one side, the person who was projecting their emotions. And what it meant was that situation weighed two people down. And at that situation, I found that I had to take control, and I had to say, look, under these circumstances, there's two sides to the story, because there was another person in that situation, but they were quietly sitting there crying.
Oh,
And then the other individual was only completely swayed down by the emotions of the person who was the most vocal. And that could, there's a real danger there, because being vocal about your emotions doesn't always mean like you're the only person.
no,
Yeah.
no. And there's this, yeah, I mean, it's a dangerous discussion to some extent because you sometimes perhaps feel that people might take it in the wrong way if you say that, someone cry. I mean, I've worked in a lot of companies where I've seen the same people
Hmm.
crying. Every time you go, some situation they're crying, and you feel bad for them, but yeah, then you wonder, you know, there's always the ones who just don't cry and just, it doesn't mean they're not feeling sad or they're not feeling bad or they're not feeling upset about something that's happened in their lives, but they're able to contain it. And that's not necessarily a good thing, but it means that they get less attention than someone who's overt about their feelings. And I've always been very reserved. I've always been mindful of I mean, there's a different story to some extent, but as a black woman in a corporate space, you have to be very careful about how you conduct yourself. So I've learned to hide my feelings.
That's my favorite philosophy of Socrates,
Yeah.
Stoicism.
Yeah.
And I did a post about it, and something that my son and I always talk about, especially in relation to the Queen, Queen Elizabeth, and how she had to do her role. So I think leadership has, personally, I think has a big role to play in being able to see, or at least have the right team of individuals with diverse talent and diverse personalities, so that they can see these things and identify. And because sometimes we'll all be different within an organization, within a team, and different people will need different type of support.
Exactly.
And the thing is, we are organizations, I feel like culturally are used to having like one way of dealing, and like a standard approach to, we have a budget and
Yeah.
everybody gets the same training or the same kind of support. But actually, what I found over the years is, you may have a budget, but sometimes some people would need a bit of therapy. Somebody else would need a bit of training. Somebody else may not need a training.
Yeah.
So it has to be so, and that can be so tricky, don't you find?
Exactly. This is it, isn't it? It's understanding what people need based on their own particular requirements. And it's really tough for organizations and for
Mm.
people managers, supervisors to be able to meet everyone in the same way. It's one of the hardest things I think about managing teams is understanding that everyone is so different. Not one size fits all, as I said before. And some people may not voice their concerns, may not voice their emotions, may not voice what's going on in the home, and other people may be very vocal about it. Oh, they'll come in and my husband really annoyed me at the weekend and we had an argument, and they'll take up all the space and all the air. And there'll be someone sitting there, how was your weekend? Oh yeah, it was fine, it was good, I had a good time. And they may not have had a good time, but they don't feel comfortable saying they didn't have a good time. And it's a bit like you said about the pub thing. There's no one size fits all. And I used to hate it. In corporate organizations, they'd say, let's all go to the pub. And if you didn't go, you were deemed to be a spoil sport, or someone who didn't know how to have fun. Never mind, no one would ever consider, back in those days, that you just didn't like going to the pub. And so yeah, it's really hard, and you have to be emotionally intelligent to be able to manage teams effectively. And there are so many leaders who are not emotionally intelligent. They've got no intelligence at all. They've got academic intelligence, yes, but not
Mm.
emotion.
Yeah, it's interesting you even said that about the whole pub thing. Years ago, I never said anything,
No,
but
you
like,
wouldn't, would you? You
but
just
like
wouldn't.
10, was it 10, 12 years ago, when they did a series of, I was on another a board thing, and they organized a meeting in a pub, and they said, and I said, are you deliberately excluding me?
Yeah.
Somebody said, why do you say that, Manwara? I
Yeah.
said, because I'm a Muslim, so I wouldn't be going to a pub, would I?
Mm.
And you know, when I said that, it never occurred to them, because you have to admit, like, it's the British culture, it's the
It
norm.
is. It's a
I
huge
might be
part of
Muslim, but
it.
it's a huge part of British culture. So they actually changed the venue last minute to a
Mm.
late night cafe just to include me.
Yeah, exactly.
And the
Yeah.
same group, then, like a month later, I became the lead. I was leading that group.
Mm.
It's
But
so
the
interesting.
thing is, it's not just Muslims who would not necessarily want to go to the pub. There's lots of, let me tell you, the amount of people who whispered in my ear, I don't want to go to the pub. I don't want to go. And they're very English and very, British and very, brought up here, and they just, not everybody wants to go to the pub. There's a real danger as a leader of just thinking that everyone wants to do what you want to do. And
Yes.
it's the whole thing about leaders, this whole the boardroom on the golf course. A lot of
Mm,
deals, aren't they, are done, won and lost on the golf course.
mm,
um, and it's interesting, isn't it, how certain spaces lend themselves to wheeling and dealing based on the fact that the majority of golfers are male. um,
mm,
the majority of drinkers are, I would have thought male as well, although I know there are women who like a drink, but you
mm,
know deals are won and lost in those spaces, and it's so exclusive and so wrong, because not everybody wants to play golf, not everyone wants to drink, and if it
mm.
means they're going to miss out, then that's terribly unfair.
Yeah, yeah. It's all interesting. Listen, we can go on forever.
we
I've just
we could
noticed.
literally, couldn't we? Could be here at midnight.
Yes, it's what, 50, almost 57 minutes. So I'm gonna say good night, goodbye from Kate and myself. It's been such a wonderful conversation, and I hope that we've given people, lots of thinking, and maybe the messages are going to be insightful for organizations around leadership, but also understanding and recognizing how food plays a big part in our culture and our communication. Any last words?
No, totally agree with you. It was an amazing conversation. Like you said, we could go on and on for hours. And for me, that really resonates. The whole idea about food, meaning so much to certain people, to many people. And that's, I think, a consideration that leaders should use in their everyday leadership styles, thinking about how food can contribute to culture, how culture feeds into engagement, joy, love, all of the things that food speaks to, really important. So thank you, Monwara. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you for having this conversation, and good night.
Good night.